Well, welcome to the WAMC's The Linda. My name is Avery Stemple. For those of you who don't know me, I am one of the owner-operators of Collar City Mushrooms in Lansingburg, New York, North Troy. And we grow culinary legal mushrooms right now. But one of the reasons that I got into this advocacy is the number of people that came into our farm constantly asking for help and having heard about the efficacy of these active medicinal mushrooms and wanting to know where they could get some. So we founded the New York Psilocybin Action Committee, which then has grown into New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives. And Pammy is here. Yeah, Pammy and I are co-presidents of New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives. And I am also the psilocybin correspondent on the Committee for Medicinal Mushrooms for the North American Mycological Association. So we're getting a lot of information out there to people, and that the North American Mycological Association, this is the first time in its history that they're openly talking about psilocybin, which is really exciting. And this they have a publication that goes from Mexico to Canada, so it's all of North America. So I am really excited to introduce tonight, and before we get our program started, I do want to introduce Senator Jake Ashby and Assemblymember Pat Burke, if you guys want to come up. And Pat is... Pat's office, Pat is one of the sponsors and original authors of A3581?
We had many iterations. I don't remember what the number is. Hi, everybody. How you doing? I'm really happy to be with you tonight, and thank you for hosting us. Thank you to Reconsider for creating these beautiful shorts that really illustrate the pain people are going through, and the opportunity that these medications present to them, where they, I think before that they had no opportunity. So the reason I got interested in this, I represent a community that largely there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of substance abuse, and I had too many friends who committed suicide or who were suffering or who had no hope. And I thought about what I could do for them. That's my job. It's literally my job to do that. And I stumbled across this a couple of years ago. And I knew it was politically risky, frankly, at the time. But, I didn't care. This is just too important to ignore. So I rolled out a bill, the first bill. I think we're on iteration, 10, 11, I don't know. But, I rolled it out, and many of my colleagues laughed at me. They told me I was crazy. They're like, you want to do what? With magic mushrooms? Are you nuts? But the conversation has changed, right? And it's because of the work you're doing. It's because of the work Reconsider is doing. It's because of all of you here. The conversation's changing. So they went from, buddy, you're crazy, you're going to lose your next election, to it now has almost 50 co-sponsors in the Assembly. Like, that's an incredible shift. And so, and I think it's because it's reinforced by the research, it's reinforced by, people's lived experiences. And so I think we're really on, the precipice of doing something great here. We just got to keep driving. So, and it's great to have, bipartisan support. So I'd like to turn it over to my Senate colleague, Jake Ashby, to talk about, why he's here as well. Jake.
Hey. Thanks, Pat. It's great to be with you all tonight. So I come at this, from the other side of the aisle, but from a veteran's perspective as well, hearing so many of my friends and other stories of the impact that this medication has had when used correctly. And, I really applaud Pat and my colleagues for advancing this idea. There are some concerns out there, but there's concerns with every piece of legislation. And this is the work that we do when we want to advance something, is address those concerns. And that's why I'm supporting it. That's why I think it's important to have the bipartisan support and to look at it from a different perspective and a different context. And I'm fortunate enough to have, obviously, someone from my district be so heavily invested and involved in it. And so I think that helps. But I think sometimes those voices get lost. And Pat talked about people in his district and where he's coming from with it. And then from the veterans' perspective, of course, and their families' perspective too. It's an important aspect to include. And I think that not only it just reinforces that legislative process in developing good policy and good legislation. So I'm going to continue to fight for that. And I really appreciate all of you coming out tonight. And I look forward to hearing your experiences and what you think. Thank you.
So basically, I'm going to introduce Stephen Apcon and Marcina Hale from Reconsider. They're going to come up and introduce the rest of the evening. And I do want to point out that I'm going to talk a little bit more at the end just to get everybody after Paul dials in. But again, I just want to reiterate my thanks for you for coming out. This is really a historic moment, and we are leading the charge here to bring healing to so many people. And ultimately, we believe that no one should be criminalized for their attempts to heal, and that truly is one of the things that we have failed at as a society is holding people back from trying natural alternatives to healing. So Stephen and Marcina are from Reconsider down in the Hudson Valley in the Catskills. They were both executive producers on the Fantastic Fungi movie. I'm really excited to share the stage with them and help move this issue forward.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming tonight. And we're especially grateful to State Assemblyman Patrick Burke and State Senator Jake Ashby. It's rare these days when we can go to the political realm and find people who reach across the aisle and are working together. And the ability to see the importance of this work and the suffering that Pat talked about, to see you guys connected in this and supporting this work is really important and very inspiring, so thank you.
I just want to add that the courage to do that, it's one of those things that we talk about, people thinking you're crazy. It is crazy not to look at alternatives to dealing with our mental and societal challenges right now. So I thank you for your courage, both of you. Thank you.
And speaking of looking at alternatives, that's really what tonight's about. We're going to show you 4 films, new films from Reconsider, and they were only made possible by the subjects of the films who were willing to open their hearts and to share their stories. And we are very grateful that of the 4 short films you see here, 3 of the people you'll meet in the films are here tonight for a panel. One of them couldn't make it. She's traveling for work, but sends her best to everybody, and you'll get to know her on the screen. So for the evening, we're going to show you these films, and afterward we're going to be joined up here by our special guests. And then, speaking of special guests, we have another wonderful thing that'll happen tonight, which is that Paul Stamets is going to join us on screen, and we're really grateful to be here with all of you. There'll be a chance to ask people questions and all of that. And right now, why don't we get started with the films, and we'll be back. Where should we start?
Well, Joe, just to start off, because, we ended with yours, and, one of the questions it always talks about is like the emotion that comes up, and how do you look at how psychedelics and this work has both assisted you, and just kind of talk about the emotions around that?
Yeah, for a long time, I wasn't connected to the emotions. Ethan spoke about that earlier, too. Dealing with the trauma, we in the firehouse, it would just be, you see something traumatic, especially with children or anything like that. You kind of just block it out. A lot of times we would use humor to cope. When we got back, we would joke around and, just to try to forget. But like all of that stuff kind of gets put away in a box in your head, and you kind of lock it up, try to hermetically seal it, but you really can't. You know, you think, I thought I was doing okay, you know, keeping it up, but you know, 9/11 and dealing with that was really tough. Yeah, I became numb, I guess would be the best way to go about it. And then having a psychedelic experience, you know, that psilocybin journey that I went on, it just, like I went in treating my cluster headache, and I had all of a sudden this realization, I could see it now. I realized that that I needed help, and I realized how I became someone else, like I explained in the video. Yeah, it's, you know, for me, it's I could say honestly, it saved my life. It really has. It's given me my life back. I'm more connected to my emotions again. The relationship I have with my wife and my family is even better than it was, I think, before. Only because if something comes up in the moment, the emotion, I sit with it, I live with it, I deal with it, you know, where I didn't have the ability to do that before. So.
I remember, Joe, you saying that, you know, when somebody asked about you being emotional, you said that's what healing looks like.
Yeah. I was, you know, I still get choked up when I get choked up about a lot of things, which, you know, was never really part of me. But now, you know, I don't know, I just feel better. You know, like I'm when the emotion comes up, whatever it is, I deal with it in the moment, and then like I can move on. It doesn't affect me the same way. You know, I don't carry. It's not like I'm carrying this bag of rocks around anymore. You know, I dumped a lot of it, and you know, when the stuff comes up again, I could deal with it. I could sit and I could remember, and it's sad, and I'll cry, but it doesn't affect me the same way as it did.
I have to say, it's surreal to me. I'm just sitting here with the three of you guys because we've spent time with each of you individually and telling your stories, and to have you here, there's like a collective thing that happens as well as the stories sort of speak to each other. And it didn't dawn on me till just before this, and I mentioned it to Ethan. You know, I'm sitting here, and we've got a former New York City policeman and a former middle school principal of the year, and whose lives might have connected in a different way at a different time, because these medicines are illegal. And it's just striking to see you both here and to think about that. And Ethan, I'm wondering from your perspective, you speak so eloquently about all of this. If you can talk about your experience as a police officer and coming from this place of, you know, law and order and scheduled substances, and these are illegal, and yet it's the one place that you found healing. And how do you reconcile those things, and how do you think about that in this moment in time as things are shifting in the world and in the state?
Thank you, Steve. I've had a lot of time to think about some of the things that I've done in my career, arresting people or impacting people. And now I am engaging in some of those very same things that I was arresting people for. And I don't take solace in it yet. But the only thing I can do is to shed some light on some of the benefits of these substances, and perhaps to get some of my fellow first responders access, or at least some education around some of these substances at the very least, because as Joe said, most of I would say 99% of the time that I put on my dress blues was to go to a funeral for a suicide, not for a line of duty death. And that's quite literally, but also the stigma for these substances obviously is, like you mentioned, these are Schedule I drugs, a lot of these, and not just not only is that a challenge for retired law enforcement, active law enforcement, but there's a mental health stigma for first responders in general, and Joe mentioned it in his video that he crawled up onto the roof of his rig to take a break, and not to show that he was hurting, but the mental health stigma in law enforcement is alive and well, and that's another challenge. It's another hill we need to climb up, and to say, we are hurting. Most of us walking around, even active law enforcement, have some form of PTSD. I mean, if you're going from a critical incident to critical incident to critical incident, you're going to have PTSD. You may not, on the spectrum, it may not be severe, perhaps, for some people, but you're seeing critical incidents every day, depending on where you're working, and sometimes you're seeing dozens of critical incidents every single day. And I want to say one more thing about the stigma. When I first got to a command that I was assigned to, and this illustrates the point very, very, very starkly. There was a poster on the wall for mental health, and there was a number that you can call if you were feeling like you wanted to talk. I think it was an in-house. It was an in-house number, but either way, there was a 9mm bullet that was taped to it. And that was a very stark message walking into that when I was newly assigned to this command, and that permeates throughout. So mental health and drugs, both of those things were very, very challenging and still are very challenging in the first responder community, specifically law enforcement.
I want to thank you for talking about that, because one of the things that we do with Reconsider is we gather communities together to be able to have these conversations. There's a lot of these communities, whether it's first responders, and first responders is different from the police to the firefighters, and also veterans, nurses, psychiatrists. There's all the different fields, addiction specialists, that are struggling right now, and that there are problems with understanding how to get help to people that they deal with, but also how to get help to themselves. And so we work on creating convenings so that people can come together to have these authentic conversations and to be able to work together to help change not just the stigma, but the education that's around all of it. And one of the gatherings with the first responders lately, we've had many police chiefs and sheriffs.
Including the former police chief in Albany, Brendan Cox.
Yeah, he was just at Avery's. Yeah. And I think it's really important that these guys get a chance to be able to meet each other and talk, and it's even fun to watch you guys, build your relationship here, and because it is community that's going to change this. And speaking about one of the communities, I mean, Charlie, you dealt with very much the community of the spiritual community around these substances, and I'd love for you to talk about that, but also your experience of the use of substances within the school system and that relationship with that compared to psychedelics, if you want.
Yeah, sure. Just first to say, I feel pretty humbled to be here with the two gentlemen on my left who sacrificed a lot, and their experiences are much deeper and more impactful than mine. So just want to acknowledge that. Say I also have a lot of family who are civil servants. My dad was a New York City firefighter for 36 years. My brother for 24. We lost my cousin Jeff in 9/11. And I also have cousins in law enforcement as well. So, we sort of a part of the same, civil service community. So, part of, the last piece that you had just mentioned, Marcine, about being in school, and this is, I had a similar experience where, we were often having to deal with students and drug use, and it became routine where, of course, these were the things that you had to do. But because I was a principal and I got to wear other hats and be involved in other conversations, sometimes about those same students and knowing what was going on in their lives, and then realizing these kids are taking these substances mostly, or at least I should say some of them, were to numb themselves from the pain that was going on, mostly from things that were going on at home. And in my time as an administrator, I think because I was wearing a different hat and I got to see things from a different lens. In that time, so it was 11 years from being assistant principal for 3 and then a principal at middle school for 8, and this was before COVID, the mental health crisis was like exploding. We did not have enough people in school to deal with the mental health that we were seeing coming in from our students. Our teachers were not equipped or trained. We didn't have enough counselors or school psychologists. And of course, then, with some students, then that leads to behavior issues, and then it leads to seeking drugs to numb that. So it's, interesting that as a path of plant medicine is what I embarked on to help myself. I was in a position, for me, it was more, I think, just stress. I didn't have traumatic situations at work, but oftentimes felt like I was being asked to do an impossible job. I think a lot of probably school administrators feel that way. Underfunded, under-resourced, and of course, being the principal, feeling a lot of responsibility for that. So just walking around with a lot of stress, and then a lot of anxiety, and then a lot of depression. And alcohol was just not working. It was the amount of alcohol that I needed to drink to feel better was not helping my situation at all. And then I just, I don't remember where I first heard about the ayahuasca, and just the more I started looking into it, the more I started to think, maybe this is something that I could use to help me. And really from the first ceremony, it was pretty clear that this is a medicine that you can use to really help yourself. Because after that, really after the first experience, I don't think my anxiety and depression were ever at that level anymore.
I remember you talking, Charlie, it's not in the film, but I remember you talking about as a principal, knowing that you had a school full of teachers that were really struggling and that alcohol was the substance that people would go to be able to get in the next day. And
Yeah, we had a lot of teachers that were, functional alcoholics, I guess. They came to work every day.
I think that the statistic that I think I read was that there's over 6,000 deaths just in New York State from alcohol every year. And with psychedelics, it's like 3, but they're also associated with so many other things.
Yeah.
We were talking about all of these systems that are struggling, and you mentioned first responders, Marcina and Joe and Ethan. And Ethan, I know you're involved in some work in providing access or helping to provide access to first responders who unfortunately are still needing to go out of this country to heal themselves from trauma that they acquired in serving this country and their communities. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I take great joy in now, and I didn't take joy out of anything for many years, but I found something that I can relate to, which is trauma and first responders and medicine. And now I work with an organization that sends first responders out of the country for psychedelic healing. And it's legal in some parts of the country, some municipalities, but if you're a 501c3 organization, it's best not to wait for it to be federally legal across the board if you don't want to get your donors in trouble, et cetera. But it is kind of bizarre that we have to send some active duty cops out of the country to Mexico, Peru, or some other countries to get help, to come back and then be a better first responder. It's a bit bizarre, but I enjoy what I do now because I get to see first responders who are hesitant, who are unsure, who are scared, and then see them on the other side of that. And it's very fulfilling, and it makes me happy.
And the cost is an issue, we know too, and I think part of the conversations that we've had around it, I know that Reconsider takes the position that it's important to actually do a decrim, and then also we have it to use for the religious and spiritual, and then also the way that it comes through in the medical level, that we can, all three of them need to work together, because even sending people out to some of these programs with scholarship are still $6,500. And there's some of them but I mean, they're the kind of cost that it's really difficult, and we're actually traumatizing people faster than we can get people to these programs, so it's a huge issue.
What's interesting is that, if you think about this movement around psychedelics and plant and fungi medicine over this last decade or years, the initial group that was leading the charge were veterans. And State Senator Jake Ashby is a veteran as well. And they were out there really supporting each other and bringing people out of the country and bringing people into the underground. And yet it always felt to us like one of the important groups in terms of moving people's understanding of this are the first responders, because not only are they in all of our communities. I mean, many people don't know a veteran, or if they do, it's somebody distantly removed.
Well, and a lot of first responders are veterans as well.
A lot of first responders are veterans, absolutely. But we have first responders in every one of our communities. And most importantly, like listening to you guys talk, it's not just the mental health of the first responders, right? The ripple effects to families and to the communities they serve. Like if you think about needing to send somebody abroad to heal in a way in which they can do their job in a safer way, in a more effective way in serving the community that they're working with, as opposed to allowing them to find access for the healing where it's destigmatized, where it's available and accessible, where there's support in the community and all of that. And Joe, it was interesting when we were at the firehouse with you. It took us a while to get approval from the FDNY to be able to film there. And they agreed, but there were a couple of stipulations. One was, and they knew we were very clear with them about what the subject of the film was. But we had to agree that we would not talk to Joe or mention psychedelics or have him talk about it while we were on the floor. Mm-hmm. And the second thing was that we couldn't film any active duty firemen, fire people, and firefighters in the house. And we were fine with both of those things. So, but we had Joe wired for sound, and we were shooting some B-roll and shooting some other things. And he went over and he was greeted by all the guys in the house. They were all guys that day, but I know there's women in the house as well. But it's definitely a fraternity, and they were really happy to see him. And we're off filming something else, and I've got the headphones on, and all the firefighters want to do is talk to him about psychedelics. And Joe, maybe if you could talk a little bit about that, but also about the importance, and each of you can talk about this in your own way, because you're all in different communities. And Charlie, your community is very different in terms of the spiritual community you're a part of. But if you can talk about the importance of community in this, because Marcina talks quite a bit about the notion of the medicine not necessarily being the substance, right, but being the experience it engenders. Yeah. The medicine being love, connection, and community. And so if you can talk a little bit about what that looks like and how each of you think about that in regards not just to healing, but to wellness and to the fullness of life.
I was lucky enough, I was honored to walk the halls of Congress to help with the 9/11 bill. And again, recently with the burn pits, I got involved with that as well. So I was walking the halls with a lot of veterans. And when I opened up to them about my use of psilocybin to treat my cluster headaches, and they all of a sudden the gates opened and they started spilling the beans about how they all knew about it. Either, they had done it themselves. They knew somebody that they had served with that left the country to get the therapy. So it was like preaching to the choir. It was like a worst kept secret. 3/4 of the people that I knew, had, that I was walking the halls with, I already knew about it. But the other thing I wanted to touch on too is, like you said, community. I would love nothing more than to bring this to the FDNY, and I know Ethan's working with TMYPD, but when you're with your community, whether it's whatever the connection is, it's with me it's working with firefighters. This medicine's going to open up doors, and when you're with your peers, that's like, pardon the expression, double magic, the magic of the medicine, but also, to be with these people that know you and know your line of work, and they know, they were there with you in those situations, those sticky situations. The community there's so much more potential to do it in that group setting with other people that truly understand whatever trauma it is that you guys deal with, or whatever you get going on. That I think really is where the rubber is going to hit the road going forward, with a lot of group group therapy and with people of your peers.
I'll repeat some of what Joe said. For me, I lost my community when I lost my career, and Joe spoke on how hard it was for him to walk out of the firehouse the last day. So to piggyback off of that, in my brilliant mindset, I figured I'll hand in my badge at headquarters. I'll clean out all of my lockers, multiple lockers, and I'll have my retirement party all in one day, so I can get it all done. And I did that, and that was a hard day. But I had lost my community, and I lost my connection. And moreover, the trauma had also forced me to recede further into a cocoon. And once I had the medicine, I wanted to connect. I wanted to speak to people. I wanted to then re-engage, because I wasn't engaging anymore. I wasn't feeling anything, good or bad. So now I found new community. I found Joe. I found Steve, Marcina, and many other people that are on similar paths. So that's my new community, and that's my new connection. And without that, I'm a fraction of what I am without connection to people and things. And that's where I was, and now I'm more connected than I've ever been. That's what the medicine's done for me.
Charlie?
Well, I would just want to say, that would be remiss in not saying this, that all of these plant medicines that we're talking about all came from native peoples from North, Central, and South America. And those people have been using these medicines for eons to cure themselves and to go deeper into a more spiritual state. And the fact that when I say we, I guess I mean, colonialism, tried to stamp that out and destroy it. And the fact that those are still, not only are they alive, but I would say every single night of the year, and just one of those plant medicines, every single night of the year, there's at least one, if not hundreds, of ayahuasca ceremonies going on around the world. So that medicine that started in the middle of the Amazon jungle, just found its way out of the Amazon jungle and is being drunk in Japan and in Russia and in Africa, and people are curing themselves from serious childhood traumas and PTSD and many, many other ailments. So that alone is just amazing. With that said, I think these plant medicines also, there's a consciousness to them. That's where the healing happens. The healing happens because they're healing our hearts. It's what 30 years of talk therapy can never cure. I had an experience where I felt like I had in a 4-hour ceremony, I felt like it was like 4 years of psychotherapy that happened in one ceremony. and speak to community and speak to opening hearts. The first ceremony I went to, I was looking around and I was thinking to myself, I'm watching these people greet each other, and I was like, are these people kidding me? They really like each other that much? Like, are these people, what's going on here? But it's real, because you're in you get to see each other in your most vulnerable place, and you get to hold space for each other to go through that process. And when you come back and do that over and over again with the same people, it creates a really beautiful, bond of the heart. The community that I sit with, people, I am the odd man out. People are from every country you could possibly imagine, and every profession you could possibly imagine. And we come there and pray together, and it's really obvious that we have much more in common as human beings than we have, in differences.
I'm just sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking, who wouldn't want you as the principal of the school that their children go to? I mean, seriously.
I also want to kind of point out, too, I think, I don't know if you guys notice this, but I can notice the difference in the kind of language that's being used here and here. And there is, it's an interesting restriction that we have of needing to keep it within a medical model a lot of times with first responders and certain people, where it can have like a much broader and more important connotation when you bring it into the spiritual and religious realm. And it's one of the challenges I think that we're having with this kind of work is because it very much connects you to what you can call whatever you want, to your higher self, your inner self, and whatever. But you're actually watching and having to watch the language that's being used as we bring this out. And the question is kind of really interesting. We have to look at ourselves is, why is that? What makes it more challenging within our medical system to use terms like spirituality and love and connection? As a therapist, there's a line that goes in all these different modalities. It's called therapeutic alliance. And I'm like, AKA connection and love. And they show how important that is. And so, I do want to say I appreciate when you bring it to that level for me that I notice. Is that really deep connection with community, and you don't have to just say it's about curing anxiety, depression, PTSD, which what we always say could be very appropriate responses for the world that we're living in and that we've created. And so we hopefully can change that language.
We want to open it up to any questions from the audience that you might have. Please, there's a microphone right over here.
First, I just want to say thanks. I didn't know what I was expecting when I came here today, and it turned out to be a very moving set of films, and I really appreciate all the stories, and they were very well-made stories, too, very, very well-constructed from a cinematic perspective. My question kind of piggybacks on the last one, and it's about the idea that these medicines really do open up access to some kind of other realm that really sort of serves as a challenge to the logics that our civilization has been running on for the last few hundred years, like the kind of materialistic framework where we just kind of think, it's just matter and energy, and the consciousness is a result of the brain, and the ways in which that's been deployed through academia and medicine and the deeper logics of how our economy works and how our entire society is structured. And it's interesting to think about the notion that once these things start to become more mainstream and more people start having experiences that entail things like, non-dual union with some kind of larger form of consciousness, some of the effects that people describe from psychedelics, like clairvoyance and telepathy and various other sorts of paranormal phenomena that result, not to mention like conversations with entities and other forms of immaterial forms of life. But that happening in the context of a society or a civilization that has been rejecting all of that for hundreds of years at this point. And the ways that might be sort of colliding or creating a sort of clash with like the deeper paradigm that we're living under. And like, what do you think the larger social effects of that could be? Like, where do you think that could go in terms of like maybe getting us to rethink the fundamental premises that we're living under?
I appreciate your question. You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, you're saying a lot of things that are aligned with why Reconsider is doing what it's doing. Because we look at, if these substances don't help us to be able to take a very important look, not just at what's happening inside of us, but what we've co-created. We have a lot of issues that we're dealing with in the world that can actually benefit from us reconnecting with the intelligence of nature, understanding that we're a part of that. And how many of you guys have seen the movie Fantastic Fungi? Okay. And it was a big part. We're executive producers of that. We took, years to bring that out. And one of the things that was important about that is to understand that we are nature. And their ability to be able to shift the consciousness will allow us the opportunity to look at what we currently created here and be able to make these very important shifts. And that's why also bringing people together to have these conversations, you can see that we are missing that level of conversation within these communities. And so bringing it in can really benefit the evolution of that.
And I would add to that the Reconsider was founded in part under this notion that, all of the things that are challenging us in humanity right now, whether they're ecological, political conflict, we look at the wars around the world, treatment of women, other inequalities, racial inequality, economics, all of that we tend to treat those like they're the diseases of our time. And what we've come to really realize is that they're the symptoms of the disease, not the disease itself. Right, and the crisis that we're facing is not ecological, political. The crisis that we're facing is a crisis of consciousness, a spiritual, and I don't mean religious crisis, right, of meaning and purpose, and that's one of the things that these medicines help deal with is that connection, that sense of something being connected to something greater outside of oneself.
It was interesting because I was just like looking at some research and trying to figure out what Americans fear the most. And we did these different categories over the years, and they change. But there's one that remains the same, and it remains number one, and that's government. Some of the biggest fears that we have is the government and the government corruption. And so, hopefully also these kinds of medicines and working with our government and working to get people engaged, because the government is us as well. And so the inspiring of these medicines and these conversations, I think, are hugely important.
I think we should also mention that there are 3 tracks in which these medicines are coming out. There's a medicalized track, which is through the FDA. MDMA will likely be legal for medicinal use in August of this year. Psilocybin not that long afterward. But that would go into the same system that's created a lot of the suffering today, and the same economic structure as well. So MDMA will be a $10,000 to $20,000 treatment for a medicine that you could buy on the street a block from here for $20. And it'll be delivered in a very highly clinicalized kind of model, which is not the group setting that you talked about, Joe, and others. The second track is legalization and decriminalization, and that's something that Pat Burke and Jake Ashby and 50 other assemblymen and senators are working on here in the Capitol to get passed, to create a regulated, legalized structure for this, and also some bills that are looking at decrim. The third track is a track that Charlie's really mentioned, and that is the religious right, the use of these medicines in a sacramental or a ceremonial way. And there are hundreds of these churches around this country, as he said, that are practicing all the time. They're in every state. And what's interesting is there is a bridge that's being built, because I know of at least one for active duty first responder who has petitioned his chief to be able to participate in a psychedelic church, and has received approval to do that. So it's the breaking down of those walls is beginning, which it feels very important to the work that you guys are doing and so many of others are doing. Do we have any other questions before we, maybe we'll move now to Paul. Oh, please.
Had any of you had experience with psilocybin, like when, recreationally when you were young? How do you get to that point where were you afraid that your inner demons would be your outer demons and be worse? I mean, what was that step like? That must have been scary. I can't imagine the point that you must have been at to. I thank you very much for stepping back from the edge. Thank you for that. Every day that you are sane is a drop of hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was that moment like? It must have been so scary.
I actually never had a psychedelic experience until, I never actually. Yeah, in a way, I kind of wish I did, but never actually made it to a Grateful Dead concert. But you talk about the inner demons. I am not afraid of what comes up in a journey. If I go on a psychedelic journey now, I kind of feel like what needs to come up will come up, and in the end, it's going to be okay. That was the one thing that I could sum up in any of my psychedelic journeys. Is some of them were scary and some of them were blissful, but in the end, I just felt this overwhelming feeling that everything was going to be okay. That was a common theme for any of the journeys that I had.
I do want to say that it is important. We discuss it in the field all the time of set and setting, and it's the set is a mindset that you come in with, and so these experiences in this medicine is not always the best for everybody, and so it's important to know if it is something that's important or good for you, and also the setting, which is where you are and who's around you and what kind of container is there, and if there are people there that are experienced and too and can hold a space, it's necessary. So
it is it's hard to talk about psilocybin and the benefits and the work that's going around this country without mentioning Paul Stamets. Paul is an extraordinary mycologist and human being who has been working tirelessly, I would say, in partnership with the mushrooms, and along with his partner, Pam Kriskow, Dr. Pam Kriskow. But Paul has been holding this space for decades. You know his story a bit in Fantastic Fungi, but what you see on the screen is even more extraordinary in real life. And he has tirelessly traveled the world talking about these mushrooms well before they became popular and part of the zeitgeist. And there's no better spokesman for them and for the importance of them in this moment in humanity than Paul Stamets. And it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome him here tonight via a virtual stream.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Excellent. Well, I'm so honored to be part of this movement. This has been my life. I've been involved in this for over 45 years. 45 years ago, I published my first book on psilocybin mushrooms. I was involved with that much earlier than that, of course, but I only have a few minutes, so I just kind of want to take a very high view on this. If you go to clinicaltrials.gov, I just checked 156 clinical trials that are registered at clinicaltrials.gov. Think of that. They had to go through institutional review boards. They had to be evaluated for safety, for need, scalability. This is hugely important. This is a wave, not only in the United States, it's sweeping the world at a time critical that I think we need to build bridges across cultures, across the political spectrum. And I think I may be saying things you've already heard, but these are by definition anti-addictive. These are the opposite of addiction, and they have so much, usefulness, not only for PTSD and depression and anxiety, but remarkable successes in breaking the addictive habits, and helps you to retrain your brain. It helps you to reset, to go back prior to that addictive state, prior to the PTSD, depression. Many people describe to me as after their experience, they can put it in a box. That was a chapter in their life. That's in the past. And now they have this new lease on life. They have a new way of thinking. The bottom line, I believe psilocybin makes nicer people. And what we need is more empathy. We need to be more empathetic to all of our other points of view. And what I'm really, I come from a conservative family. They're farmers. And then my other part of my family, my immediate family, were liberal, more so. My brother John went to Yale. My brother Bill went to Cornell. I've been to Ithaca many times. So, big shout out to New York on that. But what I really come to learn is that we need each other. This sort of liberal conservative, this dialectic is actually very healthy. We need each other. Conservatives tend to be conserved by definition. They rely on that which is proven. They're more risk adverse, I would think, generally speaking. Liberals tend to be pushing the envelope, taking risks. They fail left and right. Those liberals fail all the time. But a few times we get it right. And then it becomes so sustainable and economically and in this social ecosystem, it becomes, okay, we can depend upon this, and the conservatives adopt and protect. So I think we're at this very interesting junction in time in the evolution of the history of our societies that we need to recognize the benefits of both groups. And I'm on the spectrum. I'm fiscally conservative. I'm socially liberal. So, I'm certainly not one or the other. And I think that a lot of people are like that. It's our diversity of opinions that creates this dialogue that you're having now. I'm very happy to see that veterans, and in particular law enforcement officers, who are law enforcement officers going to go talk to? You take 100 incidents with a law enforcement officer, 100 incidents with a doctor, 100 incidents with a soldier, with a veteran. Are they going to get it right 100 times? No. There's going to be a problem. And who can they talk to? If they internalize it, they don't deal with it, and it's a monkey on their back that's eroding and just eating at them. And then they can externalize it because of their own internal frustrations. And this is where I think that for communities who are suffering, from trauma, and also have been marginalized. And I have some personal experiences in my family with addiction. And to understand that people are self-medicating because of their pain. These people are not, these are not low-level people. These are people that, and many people in the audience know this now. It's your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your neighbors. And for them to not have the ability to resolve their issues, then unfortunately, ramifies out into society, creating crime. Many of the meta studies that have been used to justify clinical studies, these are large studies, found that psilocybin use is associated with a reduction in crime, burglary, theft, partner-to-partner violence. So it's not only treating PTSD and people who have depression after the fact, but I think it serves a really important role for prevention. If we can prevent these incidences from occurring, preventing road rage. I had an incident not too long ago where there was a road rage incident. And rather than responding in a retaliatory way, I just thought, oh, that person's having a bad day, right? It wouldn't be nice if we all had that reaction, right? And this is time where I think we really need to reach out across the aisles, across all religious and political spectrums. Psilocybin has come at a time critical and the evolution of life on this planet, evolution of our societies, our governments, and the political spectrum, that we could need to have greater empathy and clearer communication and respect each other's diverse points of view, because I believe biodiversity is biosecurity. And that's not only ecologically, and I can show this very, very forcefully and very, very well supported, but it speaks to our society. We need to have a society that celebrates the fact that we're also diverse, because we all bring skill sets forward that one of us might need. And we're at a loss for a solution. And your neighbor might say, I know exactly how to help you. But if that neighbor's not willing and doesn't feel empathy, then they're not going to reach out, and you're not going to reach out to them. So I applaud everything that's happening in New York. I thank you for your efforts. This has been so important to me personally. And I'd like to leave you with the thought that with every positive experience, and let's make it clear, not everyone has a positive experience, but more than 70% of people do. It's like a pebble in the pond of wellness and goodness. Once you meet somebody who's resolved their issues and they're a changed person, that you want to tell people good news. You want to spread, oh my gosh, this person's fundamentally changed for the better. And there was no hope for them before. They tried everything else. So each one of you is a pebble in the pond of wellness that I think can have a positive impact to yourselves, to your neighbors, to your community, to the city, to the state, to the nation, to the world. Psilocybin is a medicine whose time has come. So we ask for your support. We want to be thoughtful about this. We want to be respectful. We need guardrails, absolutely. We're at the very beginning of this, but the studies that have come out, as all of you are well aware of them by now, there is a chorus of opinion that psilocybin as a medicine is unlike anything we've ever seen. So let's be respectful and be responsible in our use and allowance of this, but it's important that we have a unanimity of use, because everyone needs this, not just one group. So I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us, for all that you do every day. We really appreciate it.
Okay. And I'm signing off from a remote island in Desolation Sound, Canada. That's where I am in the background.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Thanks,
All right, take care, everybody.
Paul.
Be well.
Love you.
And we're going to turn it over to Avery in a second, but there's something that Paul said that brings me full circle to coming in here tonight and seeing you guys. And that's the ripples, the pebbles in the water and the ripples that go out, because Ethan, we were talking about this. And what you said was really moving to me, was that whether it's the trauma or the healing, when you impact a person, the ripples that go out to their family, to their communities, to their schools, to their firehouses, to the people that they work with and they serve, to all of us, are enormous, and we'll never know the extent of those ripples.
And with that, I want to thank you three, and their stories are available online, and you can share them. And it is a gift to all of us and humanity that you guys are willing to do this, and that your stories mean so much. They've already meant so much. They've been played at the Capitol in many different states, and they continue to be used as examples of what's important and the ways that we can look at this.
I always say about the veterans and also about each of you all that of the service that you provided to your communities and your country, this may be the most important service, because it's a service that is about healing and that really ripples out there. So I want to add my thanks to each of you guys. You can learn more about the work of Reconsider at reconsider.org. We are really thrilled to be partners with New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives. They are thoughtful, they're serious, they're committed. And so to Pammy and to Avery and to their whole team, we're thankful. And we're especially thankful to Pat Burke, to Natalia Fernandez, to Jake Ashby, to all of the co-sponsors in the Assembly and the Senate. And a big shout out also to our team at Reconsider, to Lena, to Jill, and to our most recent colleague, Nick, for pitching in to make all of this possible and to help get the word out. So,
and of course to Sean.
And of course to Sean. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you all so much, Joe, Ethan, Charlie, Marcina, and Steve. That was very powerful. And thank all of you. You made that step to come out here tonight. And one of the things that I heard over and over again, and that I've thought, is community. Yes, the medicine is the medicine, but community really is the medicine. And when you join together with people and you talk about your experiences, you blend your reasons. And that's why it is so important to have that cross the aisle conversation. It's like, oh, why are you conservative in this way? Why are you liberal in that way? And it's conversations that help change things. Now, here in New York, the lawmakers are the only ones that really have their voices heard, but they listen to you. So it is important that you tell your lawmakers that you are interested in this issue. Because over and over again, we spent a full week at the Capitol last year. This year, we only have one day, so tomorrow. So if you're free tomorrow, feel free to come down to the LOB building and help us rally the people. But over and over again, lawmakers would say, oh, I didn't hear from my constituents about this issue, so I don't know that it's important. So have those conversations. If you go to NY New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives, MHA.com, I just put a page up there that has a letter that you can copy and paste an email that Corinne helped draft, and you can send that to your lawmaker. And, you know, it says why it's important. You can change it. Obviously, you can add your own personalized thing. And talk to your friends and family, because talking to each other helps the idea spread, like the ripples in the pond. Every little pebble makes a ripple. And every time you talk about why it's important that people are allowed to heal with these natural medicines, then the wave gets bigger. And that blue wave, that psilocybin wave is coming. I really believe it. I also want to thank Dr. Bronner's. Dr. Bronner's has donated some soaps and some chocolate that we're going to woo lawmakers with tomorrow. And there are some over here. If you would like to drop a few, I know you already paid to come in, but if you'd like to drop a few more pennies in the bucket and grab a soap or a chocolate, the chocolates are almost all gone already, so you might want to make it fast. And grab one of these papers, because this does have some of the information about the laws that are on the books right now. And yeah, there's a lot of change happening. We have a lot of meetings tomorrow and this week with some lawmakers, and we're really hopeful that this push to spread information and really disentangle the misinformation that's been wound through our society over the last 50 years gets rewoven into a more equitable tapestry. Because one thing that I do want to also point out is, you know, everyone up here demographically looked pretty similar. There were a lot of white people up here, and they felt there's less risk in breaking the laws, and it's so important that we get people of every community access to these medicines so that they can feel safe healing in these ways as well. So one last time, thank you all for coming, and I really appreciate it.